Probably everyone's been here before, knows me, so I skipped the intro slide about me completely, and I'm now going to live edit the description of the talk because we've had a lot of, we've been working with Nx here off and on for quite a while, but recently it's just suddenly exploding across, roughly all of our projects. So I decided to use it for this project also. So we've now live edited the topic. Now, I'm going to get a project up and running and then just code on it for a little while. Questions and heckles are welcome. I'm doing something a little bit different. I didn't make slides. I just made the fonts big in my notes document and put in some shorter headings. So this basically is the slides. I mean, it's good enough, right? If it can be read. So the idea is we're going to build an app. It's going to be a really simple app. It's going to show a list of people and some tasks and do just a couple of very, very simple features with those people and tasks, because this isn't really about like app features. This is about how the tooling works. Okay, now I have already installed some stuff, and I have a couple pointers of what I've already installed and how. And of course, I'm doing this because, well, we aim to be done hopefully with the talking by 12:40, 12:45 or so, to leave some time for some discussion after. And so I didn't want to spend the entire time installing tools. So I have Node version 10. By the way, I use NVM. Raise your hand if you use NVM or any similar tool. Wow. See, that's why this is the advanced Angular lunch, because over half the people raise their hands on using that. So that's great. I'm using VS Code. I am using a REST server that we use in our Angular Bootcamp class. I'm just using this because it's handy. So in my app that I'm building, I'm going to build a back end, but it's going to be sort of a middle tier back end. It's the kind of the front end of some other back end that's already implemented out there, because that's how most of our enterprisey apps look. They end up having multiple layers. I'm going to use some Angular CLI, but I've not installed it. I'm going to use Nest's CLI, but I've not installed it. And I'm going to use the Nx CLI, but I've also not installed it. And we'll get in a minute of why I'm doing it that weird way. But I have very, very little installed. But this is a Chromebook. Anybody? I don't know if you can see in the picture or not. But I'm working in a Linux container on a Chromebook, so I'm doing a somewhat unusual thing. Okay, so with the previously listed stuff, this is all I had to do to get a project going. Now, I'm going to show you a video of running this because I don't want to spend the whole session on the slow Wi-Fi here doing this. This can take minutes, can take many minutes if you have a kind of an empty cache of everything on your computer. And so I'm just going to let this video run while I talk for a minute, if I can get to the right. There we go. How about this one? Okay, and I think this will play sound, but hopefully the sound doesn't actually, yeah. Hopefully the sound is not coming through there, so I'm just going to narrate it a little bit here. Okay, so I did a yarn create. If you haven't seen yarn create, there's a thing called npm and knit. Anybody used yarn create or npm and knit? Great, a few people, great. So this is a new mechanism that has come to npm a while back and yarn a little more recently to make it super easy to publish basically a project scaffold. And it has the important property that you don't have to pre-install a npm package to use the component scaffold. Basically this npm workspace here, this is the name of a project scaffold that's been published into the npm package repo. So unfortunately, this bit is on a pre-recorded video, and I made them big, but I didn't make them big enough. When I switch to my stuff, they'll be plenty big. And if anyone wants to know all the exact commands that I used in this part, I have captured, and I'll publish this to my blog afterward. So anyone who can't read it, don't worry, you'll pick it up. Anyway, so this is this great new way. That means that if you're making a tool that generates projects, you no longer have to make a package that you ask the entire universe to global install. We were reaching like kind of a global install apocalypse where every single tool you used, which, this expanding list of every tool, pretty soon maybe you're using 50 different tools and they all want you to global install something, completely unmanageable, and this is a way to start to claw back sanity in our global installs. Now, as soon as this starts in a moment here, I am going to fast forward. We're not going to stand here and watch the real-time 4-minute install, unless anybody really wants to. But it gave me a few choices. So this template mechanism, where you can publish a project templating package into the repo, lets you put some interactivity in. So there I was giving a name and picking some CSS library. This is NX in action. Is anybody raise your hand if you use NX at all? Raise your hand if you do not know anything about NX. Okay, so I believe I just saw a desperate plea that sometime in the next couple months, somebody on our team who's using NX all the time, come talk about it a whole bunch here. So John, hear the call. Okay, so this takes a while. I'm going to skip past a bunch of it. At some point in the middle here, I did an initial package install, some more packages that we might or might not need around GraphQL, because again, I just wanted to do as much as possible, not over the potentially awful Wi-Fi in here. By the way, this is a technique I strongly recommend anyone who does talks at Evolve live coding. If you want to show how the install worked and how the project setup worked, don't do it live so that your whole talk doesn't die if the Wi-Fi dies. Okay, so we don't care about that anymore. I did those things. It took a while. Again, I probably won't publish the link to the video, but I will publish, the exact command I ran. Very, very little work. Okay, now I want to work in the project. So I just went into the project and I ran Code Insiders. This is the command line way of launching the Insiders edition of Visual Studio Code. So that's two of those three things met our advanced criteria. If you're advanced, you should know how to launch VS Code from the command line. If you're like manually navigating through your folders again and again, you have an opportunity to get more advanced by typing code insiders dot, just open it where you're at. And if you're not using Code Insiders, I invite you to come live dangerously. If your IDE isn't breaking every other day, Now, there are a few what I consider rough edges that we've now hit. So I'm making a full stack app here, right? So you read on the tin, I'm making an Angular app and I'm making a Nest app. Nest is a way of making servers. I need to run both of those. In the box, as far as I can see, it does not currently ship with a single command that runs both. I could set up a single command that runs both, like a thing called npm run all. It's a great tool for that. It's a thing called concurrently. It's a decent tool for doing that. And I'm sure, knowing a little about the npm ecosystem, there's 50 other tools which someone in this room has used that do that. But what I did is I just ran two different windows. Any Tmux users in the audience? No? Okay. So I find it slightly more convenient to manage multiple terminals on my Chromebook in one terminal using Tmux instead of launching multiple terminal windows. I don't remember why I found that more convenient. There was some reason that I've long forgotten. Although actually, now that I think of it, the fact that they all zoom the text together instead of having to go open up each of your terminal windows and adjust their zoom, maybe that's the reason. So along the bottom here, you see these three little 0, 1, 2 things. That just means I've set up 3 virtual terminals so that I can leave a program running and go run a program in another. Okay, so the asterisk, the high-tech GUI here, tells me that that's the one they're in. So again, this is just a fresh project. Haven't done anything yet. I'm going to type yarn nx-serve. Now that's weird. Anybody know why I'm typing yarn nx-serve instead of nx-serve? Anybody know why I'm typing nx-serve instead of ng-serve? Who said that? Yep, that's right. Yep. If you do a little bitty thing I'll show in the next slide, you can avoid having to global install any of those tools at all if you're willing to type yarn in front of them. Now, is it really worth typing yarn? And maybe not. I'd probably just go ahead and global install nx so you don't have to type yarn. But that's what I did here, just for variety, just to show twisting the tools in a slightly different way. I've done just the bare minimum number of steps. I didn't even global install a single thing to get to the point we're at now. So I need to yarn nx-serve in one, then yarn nx-serve API in the other. So in the world of NX manages a bunch of related JavaScript, TypeScript applications for you. You can pick one to be the default, and it understands if it's an Angular thing to delegate to Angular to run it. Okay, so yarn nx serve, that just means run nx serve without having to install nx globally. Nx serve means serve the default application. So when I did that fresh creation that created an Angular+Nest app, it made the Angular one the default one. And so this is just nx serve. It's like ng serve, just serves my app. And then the one with the API, that means run the one called API. It made a second app, it named it API, and it's my Nest implementation. So let's do this. So in the first one, yarn nx serve, and then in the second one, yarn nx serve API. Hopefully this will all, oh, I ran that in the third one. That's interesting. See my asterisk? I guess I miskeyed. So I still have a virtual terminal in the middle, number 1, that I have available to run commands on, and I have these 2 others where I'm doing other things. So this is this nice bright line here. This is a feature that's I don't know. I have a couple of N experts in the audience here, I guess, but for the moment, if you're in a project that has Angular in it and NX doesn't recognize the command you gave NX, it delegates to the Angular CLI. Now, as I understand, that's evolving, and it'll gain increased capability to delegate to other different CLIs as you use more different tools, but for the moment, that's what you get. And here we are up and running. Okay, so localhost 4200. Okay, so here's my fresh new app. Now, this app has an API, but I have a Chromebookism or a Chrome OS-ism to hit here. If I go look over where I ran this, it swears it's listening on localhost 3333. But, oh, anybody ever use Vagrant? Any Vagrant people from back when that was popular? So there's a style of development where instead of running the tools you're running on your machine, you run them in a container on your machine, which has all kinds of benefits around like isolating and knowing, nailing down versions and so on. It has the unpleasant benefit that if your server tool only listens to localhost or 127.0.0.1, you won't be able to talk to it from your computer, which is really frustrating. You're like, wait, so I can't talk to the VM, the VM running in my machine won't accept connections from my machine. And yeah, some of them do default that way. I have not figured out how to ask Nest to not default that way. So instead of talking to localhost 3333, I'm going to take advantage of a really nice thing that, let me see, get to the right place here. Really nice thing that the Narwhal folks did for us. I guess I have code instead of insiders on this machine. And I'm going to use the fact that I already have a proxy running. So that Angular CLI already has a proxy set up to avoid having to do core stuff, so I can just talk to that one. And I'll show how that works in a minute here. Okay, back row. Tell me when I'm big enough. Am I big enough? Okay. So conveniently, there is a proxy conf in here. Oh, wow, that's a very weird sizing. So there's a proxy configuration in here that says the /API URL where my Angular app is being served is going to proxy over to this localhost 3333 thing. So if I simply know that, I can also, with this URL right here, talk to that API. Now, here, I guess I can make that part bigger. Hopefully people can read the URL at the top with a little bit of a squint. Okay, does everyone follow so far what I'm doing here? Yeah.
So far all you've done is just run the create Nx workspace.
This is what you get if you ask NX to give you an Angular+Nest application. You get an Angular application, a Nest application, and here, in fact, I will go on to the notes here. You get a project level monorepo containing your Angular and Nest application, but it gets better because rather than give you a cookbook or some great advice or some consulting services on how you would go about sharing code, it gives you this thing pre-wired. Oh, where did it go? Yes. It pre-wires it with a shared library between the client and server-side code for the type. So basically all the stuff that, well, actually a bunch of us here at Oasis Digital have spent many hours figuring out how to do over the last few years, a lot of that setup like arrives for you upon project generation with this tool stack, which is very, very cool. So it gave us an Angular app, an E2E test that doesn't really test anything yet. It gave us an API server with Nest, and it gave us a shared library between them, and then it set up the right proxying so that you wouldn't have to do any CORS issues for your client app to talk to your server app. And then in this client app it generated, so this is all just code it generated for me here. Here we go. So here we are in a component, and it sort of does the non-enterprise thing of talking to HTTP in the component, but that's okay. It's just to get you off the ground. So it talks to, here we go, /API/hello, and as you can see, that returns this data, right? And then by having that data available, let me get this open. It calls the async pipe on it. So that's what it does. So we have a client, a server, they're talking to each other through the proxying with a bit of shared code, although I'm not sure if they're actually using it. Okay, so let's start peeling some bits out here to make room to do a little bit of coding. I'll have to sit down in a minute here. I can only... Yeah, I will say that was a bold choice for them to do an inline style. It was a very bold choice. I don't know that I would have done it that way, but maybe that's just to give you a reason to edit it. Or maybe they're going to just search the web for that exact string for people who deploy without ever editing their... Okay, so there's a couple more bits here I want to give a tour before doing the first edits. Okay, so we got automatic formatting and linting came in the box. It's just like NX ordinary stuff. There's that NX intra-app dependency management rule stuff. It is ready to go. I actually have not looked to see if the generated project enforces any rules. I mean, there's only a few projects, so it doesn't really matter much yet, but it is ready to go with that. The E2E and unit tests are ready to go. They've made different default choices in Angular CLI. Paul, can you remind me, is it Jest? So they ship setup for Jest. There's nothing to stop you from using Karma, but they ship setup for Jest and Cypress. Incidentally, the Cypress is part of why that initial install takes so long, because you're waiting for it to download and install Cypress also. And then, like I said, the sharing. And I say this, like, it's 2019, right? So like 3 or 4 years ago, we would have been like having conversations about whether some of these things are good ideas and maybe somebody ought to make some tooling. But like that future is the present now. It's like having all this stuff on day one of your project, like this is today. Like you have this today on day one of your project. There's really no reason to not have this on any project. And I'll talk about that a bit later also. Okay, so back to that thing where I said I was dodging global scripts. I had to work super hard to dodge global scripts because I didn't do that yarn add, or because I didn't install the Nest CLI globally, I had to run that one command. So that in that video where I just skipped past a bunch, I ran one command to install the Nest CLI in this project. Who knows, maybe I missed it on the computer, we'll find out. And then I added this line to my package scripts. So that's all I had to do. So you can basically, with a single short line in your package scripts, you can create kind of a redirection path to say, inside this project, if I'm willing to type the word npm or yarn first, let me use this tool that, maybe its default instructions told me to install globally, create various like version problems. It's just like trivial to dodge that. And it seems to be a fairly generic mechanism. Okay, I did have to, and I will fix right now, one glitch. So I said this is the present. It's actually the present, like very slightly into the future, because there are some rough edges around the Nx+Nest integration. I think we might have a project going through this right now, and I'm curious if that project will hit this issue. But by default, when you run the Nest schematics to make things for you, it doesn't understand where to put them in the file system. It puts them in the wrong place. It puts them like way at the top of your project under the src directory, which is not where you want them at all. You want them where your project is stored in this monorepo. So There is work underway to try to find a way to make that happen fully automatically. But right now, if you only have one Nest app in your mono repo, which is pretty common, you can avoid the wrinkle for now by just making one file and pasting this in it. So this is a bit of slightly hard-won knowledge, but it wasn't that bad. Okay, so I go in here, and again, this is a freshly created one, so it should not have that file yet, and indeed it does not. So we will say nest JSON. And then, by the way, this is a low spec. This is a bottom of the line pixel book, so it is kind of slow. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is the bit we need to be able to run Nest schematics and have them do the right thing. Okay. Okay, so now it's time to start doing a thing. Okay, so let's go look at the Nest program we have now. By the way, has anyone here used Nest, or is this all new to everyone? Oh, great, that's fantastic. There's like 6 people in the room raise their hand for Nest. I really think of Nest as like an attempt to bring some of the like out-of-box completeness of Angular to the server side. And so it's opinionated in many ways, sort of like Angular has some opinions to it, and it ships with stuff that works. So if you're willing to sort of kind of not get your way on many of the little decisions, you can get your way on the big decision, which is like getting to not work as hard and as long to create the functionality you need to create, which is a pretty big win. Okay, so here's a trivial Nest app. These files should remind you of files that an Angular app would have. It's very similar. In the source directory, you get things like, let's see if I can find it. You get like a main TS, so this is the entry point for the entire application. This right here was my attempt at getting it to listen globally so that I could talk to it directly from my browser on my computer, and I don't know why that didn't work. Incidentally, on a Chromebook with this Linux container thing, you can install other apps. So for example, you could install Chrome or Chromium in the container. You then would be running another copy of Chrome inside the container, and it could talk to the other stuff in the container. There is someone here at work who runs Firefox that way, just to like blow the minds of people who are shocked to see Firefox up and running on this Chrome OS device. You know, this madness, this sorcery. Well, it's actually a couple of commands, it's no big deal. Okay, so main TS is just the entry point. Then once you get inside the app directory, if you kind of squint a little bit, you could think you're in an Angular app, right? So it's a Nest API server is composed of a bunch of modules, and those modules have various categories of things in them. One of those things they have is providers, which works just like Angular providers. It has an idea of a controller, which they don't have components here, they have controllers, so it's a little bit like Spring. Any Spring users here? Yeah, it's like a Spring controller, like .NET has like 6 different generations of things that have this idea in it. So a controller is just a chunk of code that's responsible for a certain portion of the URL space. So if I go in here, this thing here says, oh, well, just if anybody does a get for the hello route, here is the stuff to provide, right? And by the way, here is that type, that cross-tier type being used, right? So no excuse in August 2019 to not have types spread across your tiers, because you can be up and running without any edits, and you can have it. Okay, so but this is a built-in controller, and like I don't want to just like hack away at the built-in controller. I kind of want to like put in my own controller. So let's see what we can do there. Okay, so well, to not spend too much time, we will look at the command. So I actually I pasted the command that I know works, so I can talk through it in huge print before I run it. So yarn nest is my way of running Nest without a global install. Generate is a way of calling a schematic. Controller is the name of the schematic. Now, in the future, the Nx command line will be able to figure out that it's got to delegate the controller generation to the Nest code, but for the moment, you have to know that. So I had to call the Nest thing to generate it, and employee is the name, and since I put in a piece of code to tell it where my Nest project is in the file system, it's going to just work. It's going to like put it in the right place, and it's going to lace up the files to each other correctly. So let's do that. Ooh, that's because on this copy, it literally is a fresh copy, and I did not make the edit that I showed you in the slide. So let's go ahead and make the edit. Is anyone feeling lucky around a smallish install of a package over sketchy Wi-Fi? And then just as a reminder, I'm only going to add that to my package scripts. I think you're not supposed to edit your package scripts while you're running yarn or npm, so I have to be patient here before I run it. Oh, I love that that's moving at a good pace there. I was concerned it would do like, one. All right, okay. So we are in good shape. So if I simply bring up, by the way, is anybody not doing this yet? And is anyone still clicking through their files manually looking for the one you want? You don't have to admit it here, don't raise your hand. But if you want to raise your level of perceived expertise anyway, press Control P in VS Code and type the first few letters of the name and go to it. Move on with your life. Okay, so sure enough, the Angular CLI folks had already put in the hook you needed if you don't want to have a global install. And the NX people had also put in the hook you needed. Well, I'm just going to do the same thing for Nest. So now I have the hook I need to run Nest commands without a global install. Okay, so we try again. And I boldly did it without the, oh no, terrible thing happened. Look, it didn't work. Something went wrong because it put it under /src. Yeah, that's something that is not good. My file that made it do the right thing did a bad thing. Oh, what? I'm trying to find that src. So this src directory is not supposed to exist. Let's make that go away. Did I not put that file in the right place? Remember I said I need a file called, where is that guy? Oh, I need that one little bit here. To wire up, to avoid this problem, I did nest-cli.json with this stuff in it. So I must have screwed something up there. Ooh. Yeah, I must have put the file in the wrong place. Yep. Did I put it in here maybe? No. Anybody? Well, I just said I know how to look for a file, right? I accidentally put it in the apps directory. Yep, that happens. So, mv apps. So I'll move that here, and then I'll go into the apps to the place that I wanted to be. So now when I run this command, hopefully the wire up will happen and it'll put the files in the right place. Yes, and indeed it did. See, they went in the apps is where all of your apps go in NX land. API is just the name of this app. And then source is where all the source goes. It made a folder called employee and it set up my route within it. Okay, now let's just go in here to that file. Now, I happen to know, I know some of the bits and pieces, and I have an example of when I taught a class with John, who's sitting right there, where we used some of this syntax, so I can go look at some examples from that if I have any syntax misses, because I actually have not used this in Anger in the last few months. So this controller employees thing, this means everything I talk about in here goes under employees in the URL space. So it's a way of like avoiding repeating yourself about the name of each API endpoint. And so let me see. I think I can gather the other bit I need without even having to go digging around. So yes, I just do an @get, and then I put in whatever. So let's do a get, and then I'll call the function hello, although it doesn't really matter what I call it. And then do that. Now I think I should be able to auto import this if I click, oh yeah, that, okay. So just like Angular, see that was a very Angular-like experience. And I believe it's going to auto-reload this. So I don't think I'll have to do anything at all to go look under employee/hello and get the word world to come out. So under API, there's an employee, and under that, there's an endpoint called hello, and that did not work. I wonder if I do have to restart it. Let me see here. So I ran that over here. Let's see what happens. Oh yeah, look at that. See, it looks like it did the API mappings at startup. Well, that's frustrating. Ooh. Is that worrisome that only talked about my app controller? That's kind of weird. Let's see what happened. Let's see if that was enough to make it work. What on earth?
CLI wire up your new controller to the
Yeah, it looks like it might not have. The interesting thing is, I'm pretty sure it did that for us last time we used this program. Okay, so I go to the app module, and I put looks like I have to manually employee controller, auto import, big font sizes. I wonder, oh, sure enough. So with it wired up, it did do the right thing. That is the experience I thought I had last time, and I was surprised if it not happened this time. So there you go. So now I added that. Now, some might wonder, isn't this a lot of complex code over here compared to just like using Express and writing a little, 10-line Express program? And I guess it is, but once you know the invocations, it's like 1 minute to do them. But more importantly, this is already set up to like be a real API server. It has many, many characteristics behind the scenes you can go read about in the Nest documentation that make this much closer to where you want to end up. It also is ready to be easily pre-wired with many other kinds of features. So although for this trivial hello world, yeah, it's kind of silly to have this technology instead of a 2-line Nest Express handler. For like real apps, I think it pays off pretty well. So, okay, so what I wanted to do, and my goal to have success on this, was to, in this code, go fetch some data from my back end, transform it in some trivial way, just so we can tell we transformed it, and get it to display in the UI. So that's my bare minimum. Now, if we had ample time and if I coded really fast, I was going to switch it to GraphQL. That's why there's the last technology on there. I'm guessing we won't get to that based on the time. Let's make this happen. Now, for the sake of not spending too much time, I'm going to go borrow some syntax from an example written for a previous educational experience. Let me see here. And this is a different employee controller, but it'll have the pieces I need. I got to go look at my service. Because this will have oh yes, that was the answer. The answer was, with Nest, you just use Node stuff for things that Node knows how to do. And so like as far as I know, there's not a Nest HTTP thing, because like people writing Node code are already pretty happy with Axios and 50 other HTTP things. So this is the bit I need to go ahead and call something from the back end. So let's see how badly this one goes. So yarn add Axios, and then I will ignore the fact that these go in the actually I think Axios comes with types. Does anybody know for sure, does Axios come with types? Any Axiosers in here? Okay. So if I have that package, then I can do just this little bit of code. Yeah, so there it is. You just do axios.get and you type it in pretty much the same way you would with Angular. You give it a URL, and then you can say you take that response data. So that's pretty easy. Okay, so I said in my employee controller, so again, this is a client of that service out in the sky, but it's a server serving my Angular front end. So let's do a get. We'll call these maybe like the new. New will be our new employees. We're going to assume this is a list of new employees. I chose that name because that way I wouldn't type the same name here, right, to show it's okay that this name doesn't match. And I think the fact that these can mismatch is why you have to tell it the name in that annotation. Why they didn't take like a super convention-based approach and say that the name of the function has to, or the name of the method has to be part of the API. They let them mismatch. So I have an async function called new employees, and this is going to have to go talk to Axios, or talk to the backend with Axios to get the data. So import, interesting, import Axios. And this, the import looks a little weird, but it looks like it would look for node code instead of what it would look like for typical Angular code. So const response equal await get, and I'm not going to give it a type because I just want it to work. Some URL, and then I had that URL handy here, so oh, this is the one where I had to say, let me see, I'm getting confused. Okay, I had to get the right place. Okay, so the employees I need is this. This is the URL. This is the backend that I need. So if I get that data, and then I return r.data, and then slice is how you get a shorter list. And does anybody remember, is it like 0? And is that how you get a shorter list? Is that right? Okay. What? Say again? Yeah. And somebody remind me, what's the default shortcut in VS Code for reformatting the file you're in? Not on this computer, it's not. Okay. So it's a Control-Shift-I. Well, of course. Of course it's Control-Shift-I. Okay. So in theory now, I should have an endpoint that does that thing. So let's try that. So here was the tab where I was trying endpoints. Let's see if that works. Sure enough, it looks like it worked because I got a short list of employees. Now, over in my client code, and I'm not going to bother to type it because I don't want to go over in time. So over in my client code, let me see if I can find my client code. So I go to my, let me see, I get out of my API server project into my client project, and I'm just going to drop this right in the app component because this is not a presentation about good Angular practices. So we'll just do the same thing here. We'll say emps, we'll even do this thing, right? Okay. So I think, actually, I don't need to do all this part. So here I am calling that, right, from my front end code. By the way, I still have not had to restart other than that time I erroneously restarted. Okay, so now I just need to use this in here. And I think we will do something, just a real close version of it. Again, I could easily, you know, format this in 100 different ways and do some nice CSS for Bill here. But I just want to see the data. So there we go. Okay, so this is a client app living in a monorepo that I created 40 minutes ago. It called a Nest server in that same monorepo. That Nest server called a backend. Now, I didn't put a type around this for how they talk, but I showed you other code where I trivially could put a type in for how they talk. Aside from one mistake I made, I didn't even have to restart the servers around this thing, and I didn't have to globally install anything at all. So I'm going to declare success for this one. I'm hoping to give like a 20-minute longer version of this in the future where I switch this last little bit to GraphQL. So stay tuned for that at a future date, perhaps at a conference, because it would take about 15, 20 more minutes of just hacking away at little bitty bits to do that. But anyway, that's it. So I guess we'll wrap up, and then I'll take questions and answers, and then we'll try to, you know, get done to have time to talk. So questions? Whoever has the microphone can just go demand anyone that works at Oasis Digital ask a question. So.
Now this is. Hello.
Yeah.
So, not exactly on topic, but is there a reason why you're using Yarn over NPM or something else?
Yeah, so we just had this conversation in our office like 3 days ago. Oh, Paul, is that published on the channel?
I'm not sure.
That was probably one you had to edit out because all of the
Yeah. So let's see if I can link my way to the channel. So we have started a new YouTube channel, and it's not on our main YouTube channel, but it's another channel, and I have a feeling if I click here, I can get to it. It is currently named Code Talk Teach. So go to your YouTube and search for this thing, but do it now because we might rename it literally tomorrow. You never know. We haven't decided what a good name is yet. We're basically recording conversations we have that we've carefully made sure they're free of like anything customer, anything covered by NDAs or anything, and just publish them. And I think one of these we carry on about Yarn and NPM for quite a while. So I will try to give you a very brief answer. Yarn got some important things right first. NPM has kind of caught up. I find the Yarn lock file less offensive in my repository because it is more concise with just the lines it really needs. The NPM one has some extra verbosity. The Yarn one is really long, and the NPM one is really, really longer. So I've kind of got a little bit of a preference over time. But as of today, there's no real strong reason you have to use one or the other in most cases. There's a couple of edge cases, but they're not 2-minute answers.
Keeps NPM on their toes.
Yeah, that's actually a great one. The fact that we have we have an ecosystem with 2 competitors has been great for both of them.
I'm hoping a similar thing happens with the repositories themselves.
That would be a very long talk, and there's a great talk. I don't remember the name of the person, but it's one of the key people behind the NPM repository who departed recently and gave a great talk about that at a conference. And if I knew it, might be, but I don't remember. Find someone else to ask a question.
We actually have a comment from someone watching the live stream.
Wow.
You have
I didn't know anyone even watched the live stream.
we have at least one viewer now.
I thought I was streaming into the void.
But he's saying that Nest actually wraps Axios in its HTTP module.
That's a new thing to me. I had not seen that before. So
And they
tell them thank you. Or thank you. Thank you.
And they observabilify the Axios, basically.
So it doesn't bother me being promised because I mean promises are fine. When you have things that are single shot, it's totally fine to promise them.
I think it's for and the
cancelability,
no, the real-timey, I can't even think of the word for it.
the real-timey.
Firebase does it. The WebSockets, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's if Nest does it, I will probably use that one next time just because I bet it's like a slightly cleaner API at the app level. Find someone else to ask a question. You have 1 minute left.
So I'm guessing, was that an Angular 7 app or an Angular 8 app it created for you?
I believe it's fully updated to 8. I mean, not that I did anything.
I was curious because of the end-to-end project having its own separate.
Oh, that's an Nx thing.
Is it? Okay.
You can do that now under Angular 8, and I think that'll be a default under 9 as they switch over to the projects directory.
And we're going around again?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Like project and then project dash EDE.
Yeah.
So on 8 by default they moved it to an EDE folder under the project.
It's not.
Information might be out of date, but I thought they were going to keep them parallel.
Yeah, it's not clear to me.
I guess they can do business.
But to answer your question, this is 8. The Narwhal folks have like a slightly different take on what the defaults should be. And like we end up supporting customers who have a very wide variety of project shapes. So we end up a little bit neutral toward it. But there are people that have very strong feelings on how your folder should be laid out.
Yeah, and just updating or saying, hey, that's when I saw EDE was like,
Yeah. Okay, well, we will wrap that up so that we have minutes to talk. So thank you all for coming.
Live stream viewer, plug our workshop in London.
Plug our workshop in London. Okay, so live stream viewer, I hope you are in London and you tell all of your friends. Oh, you don't want to see the Angular Bootcamp one? Okay.
He's in Colorado, so.
Well, tell him to get on a plane. So if you're not going to be going to Europe's largest, you need to, because 3 people who work with me, 3 people who work with me will be talking about PWAs, so you should get on a plane to London to go see it.
Then we gotta practice that.
Okay, we're done. Thank you all.